All right, you maggots, listen up. One of the things that can go wrong when buying an old radio is there'll be a part on it that's broke or damaged, and you have to improvise. Now, in this case, I was cleaning the contacts on the wafer switch that's for the selectivity of the radio. You can go from wide to medium to narrow, and then into a position that uses a crystal. So when you're DXing or you're on the ham bands and you're copying code, and somebody's too close to the person you're copying, you move your selector switch and make it more narrow. Now, as I'm cleaning this thing, I spot something. I'm like, that don't look right. And I look at it again. I got my flashlight out, and that doesn't look right. Now, I'll point it out to you. Let's see if this stays focused. This terminal right here. Watch what happens. All right, we're going to turn the switch at the top here. All right. Notice the terminal contact went under the movable part. Somewhere in the lifetime of this radio, something got dropped into the radio, and it bent that contact down. Now, I've never had to repair a wafer switch like this. In other words, normally the fingers that are, there's two fingers on either side of the contact that moves. They lose like springiness, and they move apart. And there's ways to bend them back, but I never saw this before. And what you're seeing is the switch is in a vise here, and it's not in the radio. So I had to label all the wires that go to that switch. And I even did a little diagram in a book and wrote what each wire was and where it went to on the radio. And the reason I did that was I have to first try to bend that back and get it working. If not, I have to put another contact in there from another switch. I got to make something. And I don't want to be doing it while it's in the radio, because it only makes things worse. But I was to the point where the radio was done as far as the electronics. I was happy with all the capacitors, and I got the calibration in close. And all I had to do was work on the pain in the ass mechanics. And I went to move during the checking it all out before I went to there, or went in that direction. I didn't like the switch for the selectivity. It was a little, you had to jiggle it, and I said, oh, I forgot to clean the tracks. Now, when you clean the tracks on the wafer switch, I told you, I showed you use one of these eraser pencils. I use one of these, and you only, let's see if it stayed in focus. You only clean the track that moves. Those little fingers are self-cleaning, unless they've sprung. But in other words, you clean the tracks, and then every time you move the switch, that little finger will self-clean, as long as the main tracks are not jet black. And that's what was wrong with this switch. All the tracks were jet black because it had been sprayed multiple times. But at some point, this radio did not have a bottom plate on it. It was a rack mount. Something got up into the radio, hit that, and moved it off to the side. And I just want to show you that these are the things that can go wrong. And you can buy another one of these switches. There's one on eBay for 40-something bucks. And the problem with that is that switch could be in worse shape than this switch is. That's the problem with a 77-year-old radio and buying the parts from it. I went reading on wafer switches. You know, I realized they work by degrees of angle in a circle, and where the contacts turn on, turn off. There's a lot involved. And then when you go read the shoe from the hip guys, they have a whole different way of believing how a wafer switch works. And so many of them were saying, I thought of that, figuring out a way. All switches that are wafers that are in radios, they're basically custom built. And if you look at the wafer, you see it's got a bunch of extra holes. And that's because the company that makes the wafer switch has the ability to make it in dozens of different ways. So if you think you're going to buy a pre-made wafer switch that's going to drop right in this radio, you're mistaken. You know, you'll spend days trying to figure out how to jumper certain sections, and the angles will be off. When your numbers, when you turn your switch, it lines up with like medium, narrow. It won't line up because the switch is custom, and each detent that you turn it will be a different amount of degrees based on the front part of the switch that's also custom. It's got a ball bearing in there. It may have some type of spring mechanism that presses down. But yeah, so I just wanted to tell you that when you got a broken wafer switch, hopefully it's the contacts. You could take the contacts off an other wafer switch and solder it to a plate that you then mount in what the old terminal was mounted in. There's ways to fix this. It's not in it, but I had to take it out of the radio to give me more options. It's almost impossible to bend this back and get it right the first try with it being in the radio. So yeah, we're down another rabbit hole. But I think I just wanted to show you what can go wrong. You know, a lot of people that buy stuff, and especially this radio, I know only 1% of the people that buy it fix it, get it working. The rest, it's still sitting somewhere. And you can see it if you go read the conferences. The guy gives up. He disappears. He has a problem. One of them was a guy, he was saying the IF cam didn't have a sharp null, and he went in and changed the capacitors. Well, that could be around the IF cam, the tube, the screen bypass. It could be in that section that's throwing it out of tune. And then right away someone said it's a matter of the wires. They had a thing about the wires. The coil could be bad. You know, it's one of those things. When you buy something, you're hoping none of that is bad. You're hoping it's just your recap, maybe a bad part. You know, this is one of those things where this radio was working really good, but that contact that's not working right, that's probably when the crystal kicks in. And the crystal, I don't know if you see it in the frame. Oh yeah. Here, let's see if this thing's in focus. That brown thing, bottom left, right here. Right, man, this thing's being a jerk again. That brown thing hanging off there, that's a 455 crystal. Yeah, I know. Isn't it weird looking? And what that does is when you go into the most narrow position, you have a phasing control. So if one of those contacts is broken on the wafer switch, you're going to lose one of the functions of the radio. And in my case, it'll make me nuts. So that's why I took it all out. And I really wasn't happy putting pieces of masking tape with numbers on different wires and then fixing this and putting it back. I'm not at that level right now. I'm at the level I want this radio to be finished by now. Yeah, and I'm just thinking all along when I've been working on this radio, I'm thinking about how Shango, when he does a resurrection, gets the radio working, or television, it's a piece of crap, which this radio is. He puts it out in his patio, and he puts fireworks in it. He sets it on fire and blows it up. So many times, I thought about doing that with this radio. You know, this only cost me $250 shipping, but I don't care what you pay for these radios. They all have to be recapped. And that's the downside. It's 77 years old. One of the videos that I watched that a guy has one of these, somebody recapped it. And he worked on it. He found what was wrong with it. So he had a big step up. In other words, I recapped this and I'm still finding stuff in the radio that's wackadoodle. I think that's it. All right, that's it.